As we said before, trust may be described as basic to democratic society, its institutions, and our interpersonal relationships. It depends on the consistency in and predictability of behavior. As you could see in Afghanistan, you couldn't always predict. I started thinking about the issue of trust one day last summer when I came to a stop sign. I thought about how I trust the other drivers around the stop signs to know about the right of way rule. That rule is when two vehicles arrive at a stop sign about the same time, one on the right should have the priority. I look usually into the driver's eyes to see if they know they should be stopping and let me through if I'm on the right. I will come back to that a bit later. In 2020, as David said, Buttigieg published a book on trust. He called the 2020s as the deciding decade. He alluded to the crisis of trust in the U.S. that had been building since the mid-1960s. In 1958, a survey of American people reported that they could trust Washington to do the right thing most or all of the time. That was pretty amazing to me, 1958. But then the peak of the Vietnam War and the publication of Pentagon Papers started to erode that trust. The percentage of Americans who believed in trusting their governments fell dramatically. Trust in Washington continued to decrease so that by 2019, only 19% of the American population in a survey said that they could trust their government most or all of the time to do the right thing. Now, what factors led to this erosion of trust? Pete Buttigieg says there are several, and I'm just going to list a few right now. First was the development of doubt. Remember how tobacco industry raised doubt about the connections between cancer and tobacco use. Remember how the fossil fuel industry created doubt about the role of human activity on climate change. And remember when COVID appeared, doubt was stated about the origins of it, whether wearing a mask and social distancing did anything. And then the doubt about the mRNA vaccines. And that then went into doubting about any vaccines. How were they developed? How were they tested? His second comment is about the increase in the circulation of outright misinformation, lies, the role of fact-checking in trying to determine what is misinformation, and then the distrust in the honesty of our leaders. Recall Spiro Agnew's corruption and his removal from office. Remember the role of the Watergate and the eventual resignation by Nixon. There was a decrease in the functioning of the checks and balances. And then Reagan came along in the 1980s and began to promote an ideology to distrust government, to distrust labor unions, and promoted the idea that corporations were only responsible to shareholders. To maximize the profits was something that was necessary to improve the economic success of Americans through the trickle-down theory. Government, these are the kind of comments that you heard frequently. Government is not the solution to our problems. It is the problem. Or, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. These phrases, plus the dismantling of regulations, led to doubt and distrust of government and all of its institutions. Cable news came onto the scene. Channels such as CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News were all becoming popular. These companies found that expressing and airing controversial opinions, as well as promoting people who were very adamant about their opinion, and did heated debates on the TV, raised the viewership of this channel. In the 1980s, there was also a steep rise in income inequality. This led to significant separation of interests and skepticism as to the truthfulness of the politicians and the government institutions. Then, history and social science began to reveal that there have been many occurrences of the U.S. government labeling some segments of our society as untrustworthy, and that led to those segments of society to not trust the government. This came up with the revelation that many of the treaties between our Native Americans and the government were disregarded when the land granted to the treaty was found to be valuable. Also, the government appointed white trustees to manage the assets of these Native Americans. That is exemplified in the play Osage County. Think about how the Black Americans were given tests or made to pay poll taxes in order to register to vote, as though they weren't smart enough to be able to vote. And then the arrival of the internet, followed by the massive amount of social media. That resulted in an instant circulation of all news, both the trusted news and alternative news. And finally, the pandemic led to a distrust of each other. I remember standing in line next to a person who was not wearing a mask. When I asked him to put on a mask, all he did was yell at me. So I couldn't trust that people would be compliant with the social distancing or the wearing of masks. The pandemic created a distrust in science and vaccines. Just think of all the news about how the hantavirus may be our next pandemic. And that distrust and fear is being promoted when the scientists that are studying hantavirus are losing their funding and having to stop their research. So we are now in a crisis of trust. How can we reestablish it? Well, Jimmy Wales, the founder or one of the founders of Wikipedia, has proposed some thoughts in his book, The 7 Rules of Trust. He spends the first part of his book describing 2 institutions that came onto the scene in the last 25 years. Most folks thought that these institutions would never succeed because they depended on people trusting each other. These institutions are Wikipedia and Airbnb. Wikipedia in its early days was written by people who were considered non-experts. Later, more experts became involved. Airbnb is highly dependent on trust between the host and the renters. Both institutions had serious breaches of trust in their early days, but each was able to reestablish the trust. Just think of how many people, and even yourself, using Wikipedia these days for your information. And sometimes many of us, when traveling, will look to Airbnb as a way to save money and have more people travel together. Lynn, if you could please start the PowerPoint. These are the 7 rules, and I'm sharing them with you today. Number 1, make it personal. Reliability and presentation of the other, as well as authenticity, contribute to trust. I think of when I went to see one of my surgeons, how I trusted him because he gave me a simple, clear, procedural discussion of what might happen and how it would proceed. And then circling back to the example of stopping at a stop sign in the right of way, I note that I seem to have more trust in the other driver if I can make some eye contact. I note that if they have tinted windows, I can't make that contact, and I'm a little hesitant about proceeding into the intersection. Number 2, people are born to connect and collaborate. Count on human nature. Recall how the social isolation affected you during the pandemic and how many people started to create their social bubbles so they could interact personally with each other. FaceTime calls, Zoom, and interactive internet began to flourish as the lockdown proceeded. In response to that isolation, people wanted to get together. Number 3, a strong, clear, positive purpose is essential for people to work together and make something wonderful. Think of how the appointment of a task force or committee with a well-defined purpose works really well. Those with a kind of vague purpose, like handle the finances or tell us what would make our congregation more of a community. Vague purposes don't seem to work as effectively. Number 4, trust in the power of reciprocity. To get trust, give trust. Assume good faith. Think of how much better some employees can thrive and produce wonderful things if they are not being micromanaged by a supervisor. Number 5, be civil. We teach our toddlers to be civil. Practice what you preach. Focus on the argument, the facts, not the person. And I think our president currently could learn something from this principle. Whenever a female journalist asks him something that he doesn't like, he attacks her. And now he's even doing that with the male journalists, calling them treasonous. Number 6, have a mission. Stick to it. Don't take sides in disputes of others who are pursuing their own agendas. When building trust, try to be neutral. Avoid opinions. Try to stick to the facts and information that you receive from reputable sources. And number 7, transparency. This builds trust, especially when there is something to hide. Use statements against your self-interest. Self-incrimination is okay. Hearsay is not. Examples are, I screwed up. I was wrong. Criticize your side when warranted, and praise the other side when deserved. Since Wikipedia has developed trust over the years and is now used by many to investigate such a variety of topics, Jimmy Wales rules must have something to say about reestablishing trust. As we move into our annual meeting later this morning, let us be reminded about the practice of trust and these suggestions about establishing it. Now is the time to take our offering. Please give what you can to sustain this building, our staff, and the activities of our congregation. There's a QR code on the screen and in the order of service that you may use at this time.